Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you, honey." They announced it like a completed checklist. "We drained your accounts. We sold the house. It is for your sister's wedding." They genuinely believed they had ruined me because they only knew the pieces I let them see. They had no idea my job is hunting invisible threats online, or that the house they sold was not the one that mattered. They did not know their celebration had already triggered a chain reaction ending in handcuffs. My name is Holly James, and I had spent the last 15 years of my life learning how to be invisible. In my line of work, visibility is a liability. I live in a quiet, nondescript subdivision in Frisco, Texas, where the lawns are manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the neighbors wave but never ask questions. Inside my home office, the blinds are usually drawn against the harsh Texas sun, leaving me bathed in the cool blue glow of 3 curved monitors. It was a Tuesday afternoon, specifically 2:17 in the afternoon, when my phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. It was not a work call. It was a group FaceTime request. The screen displayed 3 names: Mom, Dad, and Tesser. I hesitated. My family did not do group calls for casual chats. We were not that kind of family. We were the kind of family where communication was transactional, usually involving a crisis that required my money or my silence to fix. I adjusted my headset, muted my microphone on the company Slack channel, and accepted the call. The screen split into 3 chaotic squares, but the audio was a singular wall of noise. She picked up. "I told you she was just sitting there." My mother, Pamela, said she was holding the phone too close to her face. The angle unflattering, showing the ceiling of what looked like their living room in Plano. "Holly, listen to us." My father, Gordon, cut in. His voice had that booming quality he used when he was trying to sell a used car or convince a waiter to take a coupon that had expired 3 months ago. "We do not have a lot of time, and we needed to tell you this all at once, so there is no confusion." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, my fingers hovering over my keyboard. "Tell me why?" I asked. My voice was steady. It always is. "We did it," Tesser squealed. Her square on the screen was shaky, the background a blur of white, tulle, and crystals. She looked frantic and euphoric, her eyes wide. She was 25 years old, but in that moment she looked like a toddler who had just been given the keys to a candy store. "It is happening. Holly the Lark. Tomorrow it is actually happening." "What is happening?" I asked again, though a cold knot was already forming at the base of my stomach. "The wedding, obviously," Tesser snapped, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before returning to full wattage. "We secured the venue, the platinum package, the one with the orchids flown in from Hawaii, and the 7-course dinner. It is a dream, Holly, a literal dream." "That is expensive, Tesser." I said, "Last week you were crying because you could not afford the deposit on the community center." "That is what we need to talk about," my father said. He cleared his throat. He did not look at the camera. He looked at a point somewhere past his phone, perhaps at the wall, perhaps at his own shame, though I doubted he possessed enough self-awareness for that. "We handled the financial situation. We drained your accounts," my mother said. She said it so simply. She said it the way one might say, "We bought milk," or "We took out the trash." I blinked. The hum of my computer tower seemed to grow louder in the silence. "Excuse me. We went to the bank this morning," my father said, his voice gaining strength as if the act of confessing gave him momentum. "And we transferred the funds, all of them, the savings, the emergency fund, that investment account you have at the local branch. We moved it to my primary checking account." I stared at the pixelated image of my father. "You cannot just walk into a bank and move my money, Dad. That is not how banking works." "We had the power of attorney," my mother interjected, holding up a piece of paper that crackled in the audio feed. "From when you were in the hospital 2 years ago. We found it in the safe. The bank manager, lovely man, Mr. Henderson, he said it was still valid since you never revoked it." And the house Tesser cheered, unable to contain herself. That was the best part. Mason found a buyer who paid cash. Instant cash closing. Can you believe it? My fingers curled into the arms of my chair. "You sold my house." "We sold the rental property," my father corrected, sounding proud of his business acumen. the one in Garland. We signed the papers an hour ago. The money is already wired. It covers the venue, the catering, the band, and the honeymoon. Tesser is going to Bora Bora. It is a once-in-a-lifetime event, Holly, my mother said, her voice taking on that familiar wheedling tone she used whenever she wanted to rewrite reality to suit her narrative. Tesser deserves this. You know how hard she has had it. You have so much. You are always working. You never spend anything. You just hoard it. We knew you would want to help your sister, but we also knew you would be difficult if we asked. So, we made an executive decision for the family. We are a family, Tesser said, beaming. Family sacrifice for each other. I sat there in the cool air of my office, surrounded by $300,000 worth of encrypted servers and proprietary hardware, and listened to my family confess to grand Laracenian real estate fraud. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw my coffee mug against the wall, even though the impulse surged through my arm like an electric shock. In my line of work, emotion is noise. Emotion blinds you to the data. When a server is breached, you do not weep for the lost packets. You isolate the node, you trace the intrusion, and you neutralize the threat. I took a slow breath. Just so I am clear, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming flat and hard. You used a power of attorney for my appendectomy 2 years ago to access my accounts. You transferred the balances to Dad's account, and then you used that same document to sell the property in Garland to a cash buyer. Is that a correct summary of the events of this morning? Stop talking like a lawyer, Holly. Tesser rolled her eyes. You are ruining the vibe. You should be happy for me. I am getting married at the Larchmont, and you have spent all the money I asked. It is gone. Committed. My father said, vendors are paid non-refundable. That is the industry standard. Holly, you cannot get it back. So do not even think about trying to claw it back and ruining your sister's big day. What is done is done. We left you a few hundred, my mother added benevolently, for groceries. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the desperate need for validation in Tesser's eyes. I saw the weak chin and the arrogance of my father. I saw the calculating coldness disguised as maternal concern in my mother. They looked so triumphant. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought that because I was the quiet daughter, the one who followed the rules, the one who worked with computers, that I was soft. They had no idea. Okay, I said okay. My father blinked, surprised by the lack of resistance. I understand, I said. You have taken the money. You have sold the house. The wedding is tomorrow. See, Tesser clapped her hands. I told you she would get over it. Thanks, Holly. You are the best big sister ever. I have to go. I have a fitting for my second dress. We will see you tomorrow, dear, my mother said, smiling. Wear something nice. Not that gray suit you always wear. The call ended. The screen went black. I sat in the silence for exactly 10 seconds. Then a short, sharp laugh escaped my lips. It sounded foreign in the quiet room. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of a pressure valve releasing steam before the tank explodes. They thought they had stripped me bare. They thought they had cut off my legs. But all they had done was poke a sleeping dragon with a sharp stick. I swiveled my chair toward my main workstation. I am a senior threat analyst for Cobalt Gate Security. My job does not involve fixing printers or resetting passwords. My job is to hunt down state-sponsored hackers, dismantle organized cybercrime syndicates, and track people who think they are invisible on the dark web. I spend my days sifting through terabytes of data, looking for the one anomaly that betrays a thief. I trace digital footprints across continents. I know how to find anyone, anywhere, and I know exactly how to document a crime so that it is irrefutable in a court of law. My parents thought they were clever, but they were analog feeds in a digital world. I woke up my primary monitor. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, the clicking sound of familiar, soothing rhythm. First, I opened a new case file. I named it simply Project Family. I logged into my banking portal. The dashboard loaded, and the carnage was immediate and visceral. The checking account 0, the high-yield savings account 0, the brokerage link liquidated and transferred 0. I clicked on the transaction history. There it was, a digital trail of blood. Transfer to Gordon James. $22,400. Transfer to Gordon James, $18,100. Transfer to Gordon James, $5,000. They had structured the transfers. They had kept them under specific limits, likely on the advice of someone who thought they knew how banking algorithms worked. They probably thought this would avoid triggering a suspicious activity report. They were wrong. The velocity of the funds moving out would have already flagged the account. But since the recipient was a family member with the same last name and a history of smaller transfers, birthday money, holiday gifts, the automated fraud detection had hesitated just long enough for them to clear it. I took a screenshot, timestamp 2:25 in the afternoon. Then I opened my email. I scanned past the work notifications and the spam. There it was. An email from a title company I vaguely recognized. Subject: Congratulations on your closing. I opened it. The attachment was a PDF. Settlement statement. Seller Holly James, represented by attorney-in-fact Gordon James. Property address 412 Oak Creek Lane, Garland, Texas. Sale price $285,000. My eyes scanned the numbers. They had sold it under market value. A quick sale for quick cash. The funds were listed as wired to the same account, Gordon James. I leaned closer to the screen, analyzing the signature block on the last page. There was my name scrolled in my father's handwriting, followed by Gordon James, Poer. They had actually done it. They had walked into a title company, signed my name, and handed over the keys to a house they did not own. And that was when the laughter bubbled up again, colder this time. Because here is the thing about my parents. They never listened. They never asked about the details of my life because they found the details boring. When I told them I bought a rental property 5 years ago, they heard Holly owns a house. When I told them I set up a limited liability company to manage my assets for liability protection, they heard blah blah legal stuff. They thought the house in Garland belonged to Holly James, but it did not. I pulled up the deed record on the county clerk's website just to look at it to savor it. The owner of record for the property at 412 Oak Creek Lane was not Holly James. It was Seabaroo's Holdings, LLC. I am the manager of that LLC. Yes, but legally the LLC is a separate entity, a power of attorney granting authority over the personal financial affairs of Holly James does not grant authority to sell the assets of a corporate entity. My father cannot sign for Seabaroo's Holdings, LLC. He has no standing. He is not a manager. He is not a member. He is a stranger to that company, which meant the title company had screwed up badly. They had accepted a personal POA for a corporate asset, and it meant my parents had not sold my house. They had sold a house that belonged to a company they had no legal right to touch. They had committed wire fraud, title fraud, and theft by deception. And because the amount was over $200,000, and because they had used the internet and wire transfers to do it, they had just crossed into federal territory. I looked at the congrats on closing email again. Oh, Dad, I whispered to the empty room. You did not sell a house. You just sold your freedom. I saved the PDF to a secure encrypted drive. I started a log. I noted the IP address from the login notification on my bank account earlier that morning. A device that did not belong to me located in Plano, Texas. I noted the time of the call. I noted the confession. They wanted to play a game. They wanted to strip me of the life I had built so Tezer could have one day of glory. They wanted to show me that I was just the backup daughter, the bank account, the resource to be harvested. I swiveled my chair back to the window and cracked the blinds just enough to let a sliver of light hit my face. They said the wedding was tomorrow. They said it was at the Larchmont. I checked my calendar. It was clear. We drained your accounts, my father had said. I looked at the zero on my screen. It hurt. I will not lie. Seeing 15 years of discipline wiped out in a morning hurt like a physical blow, but money is just code. I can make more money. What they had lost was something far more valuable. I reached for my phone and dialed a number I had not used in a long time. Not the police. Not yet. The police are a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I needed to document the blast radius before I detonated the bomb. But first, I needed to get ready for a wedding. My parents were right about one thing. It was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime event, just not the one they were planning. To understand why I did not scream when my father told me he had stolen my life savings, you have to understand the architecture of my family. In the James household, love was a finite resource and economics was a zero-sum game. If Tesser won, I lost. If I won, which was rare, it was considered a clerical error that needed to be corrected. I was 12 years old when I realized I was the backup daughter. It was not a dramatic realization, but a slow accumulation of data points, like a server log filling up with error messages. I remember asking for $60 to take a localized qualifying exam for a math competition. My father had sighed, the heavy burdened sigh of a man carrying the weight of the world, and told me that money was tight, that we all had to make sacrifices, and that I should be proud enough of my grades without needing a trophy. 2 days later, Tesser, who was 7, decided she wanted to be a ballerina. By the weekend, she had a pink tutu, leather slippers, and a check written for 6 months of lessons at the most expensive studio in Plano. She is artistic, Holly, my mother had said, smoothing Tesser's hair. You are practical. You understand? I understood. I understood that I was the draft horse, steady and invisible, while Tesser was the show pony. As we grew older, the disparity became a chasm. When I turned 16, I was told that buying a car would be a good lesson in fiscal responsibility. I worked nights at a frozen yogurt shop, saving every tip until I could afford a 10-year-old Honda with a sticky transmission and no air conditioning. When Tesser turned 16, my parents drove a brand-new white convertible into the driveway with a red bow on the hood. We could not have her driving a junker, my father explained, avoiding my eyes. It is a safety issue. You are a better driver. Holly, you can handle a difficult car. Tesser needs the safety features. That was the narrative. Holly is strong. Holly can handle it. Tesser is fragile. Tesser needs help. They weaponized my competence against me because I never asked for help. They assumed I never needed it. And because Tesser never stopped asking, they assumed she always deserved it. I moved out at 18. I put myself through a computer science degree by working 2 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. I learned the language of code because code does not lie. Code does not promise you a white convertible and then hand you the keys to a wreck. Code is fair. If you write it correctly, it executes. By the time I was 25, I was making 6 figures. By 30, I was a lead analyst. I lived well below my means. I drove a reliable mid-range sedan. I bought my clothes on sale, but in the background, I was building a fortress. I maxed out my retirement accounts every January 1st. I funneled money into low-cost index funds. I built an emergency fund that could sustain me for 2 years. And yes, I bought the rental property in Garland using an LLC structure to separate my personal liability from my business assets. My parents knew I was doing well with computers, but they had no concept of the scale. To them, wealth was flashy. It was designer bags and leased luxury cars. They did not understand that real wealth is silent. Real wealth is the ability to walk away. But about 6 months ago, the dynamic shifted. The timeline correlates exactly with when Tesser got engaged to Mason Vale. Mason was a real estate agent who wore suits that were slightly too tight and cologne that lingered in a room long after he had left. He had a smile that sopped at his mouth and eyes that were constantly appraising the value of everything they touched. The first time I met him at family barbecue, he did not ask me about my hobbies or my life. So Tesser says you are in tech, he said, flipping a burger. Startup equity, or are you strictly salary? Salary. I lied. Smart. He nodded, though his expression suggested he thought I was an idiot. But you own your place in Frisco, right? That market is up 40% in the last 3 years. You are sitting on some serious equity. Have you thought about leveraging it to buy more doors? I am happy with what I have, I said. He chuckled. Nobody is happy with what they have, Holly. That is just what people say when they do not know how to get more. After that dinner, the phone calls from my mother started increasing in frequency. For years, we had spoken maybe once a month. Suddenly, she was calling 3 times a week. At first, it seemed like she was just trying to reconnect. She would ask about my day, complain about her neighbors, and fill me in on the wedding planning. But then the questions started. "Ollie, honey, your father and I are updating our will," she said one evening in November. "We just want to make sure we have all the details right. Who are you banking with these days, just so we can put it in the file in case something happens to you?" "I am fine, Mom. You do not need to worry about my accounts." "It is not worrying. It is estate planning," she insisted. "We just need to know the institutions. Is it still Chase, or did you move to that online one?" I gave her the name of my secondary bank, the one where I kept my petty cash. I thought I was managing the information flow. I thought I was being smart. A month later, she came to my house. She claimed her printer was broken and she needed to print out some contracts for the wedding venue. I let her into my office. I logged into my computer. I printed her documents. "Oh, look at that screen," she said, pointing to one of my monitors. "Is that your bank? It looks so complicated." I minimized the window immediately. "Just work stuff. Mom, you know Mason was saying that with the way the economy is, it is dangerous to keep too much cash in one place," she said, picking up a printed page. "He says you should really let a professional look at your portfolio. He offered to do it for free since he will be family." "No, thank you. You are so stubborn." She sighed. "We are just trying to help. You act like we are trying to steal from you." The irony of that sentence echoes in my head now. That was when the paranoia kicked in. I am a threat analyst. My brain is trained to recognize patterns of intrusion. The social engineering tactics my mother was using were clumsy, but they were persistent. The questions about equity, the sudden interest in estate planning, the way Mason would look at my furniture, estimating its resale value. I started keeping a log. Every time they asked about money, I wrote it down. December 12th, Mom asked if my life insurance policy lists her as the beneficiary. January 4th, Dad asked if I still owned the Garland house or if I had sold it. January 15th, Tesser asked if I could co-sign a loan for the honeymoon, then laughed and said she was joking when I said no. I knew they were desperate. Tesser's vision for her wedding was a black hole that was consuming their retirement savings, but they could not say no to her. They never could. I suspected they might ask to borrow money. I suspected they might try to guilt me into paying for the catering. I did not suspect they would rob me, but just in case, I set a trap. It is a technique we use in cybersecurity called a honeypot. You create a vulnerability that looks appealing to an attacker, something easy to access, to distract them, or to alert you that a breach is in progress. I created a checking account at a local credit union. I moved $2,000 into it, enough to look like a legitimate active account, but not enough to ruin me if it vanished. I linked this account to my main profile, but I did not secure it with my usual hardware key. I left the password written on a sticky note in the bottom drawer of my desk, the place where my mother always looked for a pen when she visited. And then I set up the alerts. I configured the system so that any login from a new device would trigger a silent push notification to my encrypted phone. I set it so that any transfer request, no matter how small, would generate an immediate email to my secure server. I thought of it as a paranoia tax. I thought I was being overly cautious. I thought they are my parents. They are selfish and they are entitled, but they are not criminals. Then came the hospital visit 2 years ago. I had a burst appendix. It was an emergency surgery. My parents had come to the hospital. I was groggy, pumped full of morphine and antibiotics. I remember my father holding a clipboard, just some insurance forms. "Honey," he had said, his face swimming in my vision. "They need your signature to process the claim so you do not get billed." I signed. I trusted them. It is the one vulnerability. You cannot patch the biological imperative to trust the people who raised you. I did not know I was signing a durable power of attorney. I did not know they had kept that document filed away like a dormant virus, waiting for the right moment to execute. So when the phone call came today, when they admitted to draining the accounts, I was not just reacting to the news. I was reacting to the confirmation of a hypothesis I had been terrified to test. But there was one thing they missed. When they used that power of attorney to access my main accounts, they must have stumbled upon the honeypot account first. They must have seen the $2,000 and thought, "This is it. This is all she has." Then they must have dug deeper found the links to the other institutions, and used the POA to force their way in. But in doing so, they triggered the tripwire. 10 minutes before they called me, my phone had vibrated, not a text, a specific distinct vibration pattern I had programmed for one specific event. Alert: unauthorized admin access. IP address 192. Location: Plano, Texas. Device: iPhone 15 Pro Max. I knew Mason had an iPhone 15 Pro Max. I knew they were in the accounts before they even opened their mouths. I knew the money was moving. What they did not know was that the house they sold, the one in Garland, was not owned by Holly James. They had used a power of attorney for Holly James to sell a property owned by Subaru's Holdings, LLC. They had forged a corporate resolution. They had bypassed the operating agreement. They had bluffed their way through a title company that was likely too eager to close the deal to check the corporate standing. They thought they were Robin Hood stealing from the rich sister to give to the poor sister. They were just amateurs playing with fire. I looked at the blank screen of my phone after the call ended. I thought about the little girl who just wanted $60 for a math test. I thought about the woman who drove a car with no air conditioning in the Texas heat for 5 years. You wanted the money. I whispered to the empty room. You got it. I opened the folder on my computer labeled Project Family. I moved the recording of the FaceTime call into it. Then I opened the log file from the Honeypot account. It showed everything: the initial login, the failed password attempts, the successful entry, the navigation to the external transfers tab. They had left fingerprints at the scene of the crime before they even broke the window. I stood up and walked to the closet. I pushed aside the gray blazers and the sensible slacks. In the back, covered in plastic, was a dress I had bought for a garler 3 years ago and never wore. It was navy blue, sharp, tailored, and intimidating. If I was going to a wedding that had been paid for with my life savings, I was not going to look like a victim. I was going to look like the person who was about to burn the venue to the ground. Legally speaking, I checked the time. It was 4:00. The banks were closing soon, but the fraud department hotline was open 24 hours a day. I sat back down. I put my headset on. I dialed the number. Cobalt Gate Security. "This is Holly James," I said to myself, practicing the tone, reporting a critical breach. Then I waited for the operator to pick up. The game had officially begun. The red glow of the recording indicator on my screen was the only warmth in the room. I had transitioned from shock to a state of cold, predatory focus. In my profession, we call this incident response mode. The breach has happened. Now you stop the bleeding and capture the evidence. I pulled the raw access logs from the banking server. My parents and Tesser were celebrating a victory they did not understand, but the metadata told a different story. I filtered the login history for the last 30 days, looking for the anomalies that always precede a catastrophic failure. There they were. The first unauthorized access had not happened this morning. It had occurred 4 days ago, at 3:14 in the morning. I stared at the timestamp. 3:14 in the morning is not when my 65-year-old father wakes up to check his balance. It is not when my mother decides to organize her finances. It is the witching hour for people who are up to no good. I traced the device fingerprint. It was a MacBook Pro running the latest operating system. My father uses a 10-year-old Dell that sounds like a jet engine when he opens Solitaire. My mother uses an iPad. She still does not know how to update. This was Mason. I could see him sitting in the dark, the blue light of the screen illuminating that smug, calculated smile, sifting through my life. He had been inside my accounts for days, watching, planning, waiting for the wire transfer limits to reset. I expanded the transaction details. This was where the amateur nature of their crime collided with Mason's dangerous pseudo-knowledge. They had not just drained the account in one lump sum. They had structured the withdrawals. $9,500, $9,800, $9,000 flat. My eyes narrowed. In the world of financial crime, this is called smurfing or structuring. It is a deliberate attempt to evade the $10,000 reporting requirement mandated by federal law. If my father had walked into a bank and asked to withdraw $40,000, The teller would have filed a currency transaction report by keeping the transfers just under the threshold. Mason thought he was being clever. He thought he was flying under the radar. He was wrong. Modern banking algorithms do not just look at the raw numbers. They look at the velocity and the pattern. 3 transfers of $9,000 in 48 hours trigger more alarms than a single transfer of $30,000. By trying to avoid a simple report, Mason had committed a separate federal felony structuring financial transactions to evade reporting requirements. 5 years in prison per count. He had turned a theft into a federal indictment before the money even hit my father's account. I took a screenshot of the cluster. I saved it to the case file. Next, I opened the email with the subject line, "Closing Documents." The PDF was heavy, over 50 pages of legalese that most people skim. I did not skim. I read every line. I scrolled to the signature page of the warranty deed. There it was. Polly James signed in a shaky, erratic script that looked nothing like my usual precise hand. Beneath it, in bold block letters, Gordon James, attorney. In fact, I scrolled back up to the attachment labeled Power of Attorney. My heart hammered against my ribs, a slow, heavy thud. The document was dated November 14th, 2 years ago. I stared at the date until the numbers blurred. November 14th. I remembered that day. I remembered the white-hot agony in my abdomen, the sterile smell of the emergency room, the nurse telling me my appendix was on the verge of rupturing. I remembered the morphine drip, the way the ceiling tiles seemed to breathe, and the way my father's voice had floated in and out of the fog. "Just sign here, honey. It is for the insurance. We do not want you to worry about the bills." I had signed. I would have signed a confession to the Kennedy assassination if it meant the pain would stop. I looked at the notary stamp on the document. Linda G. Mertz. I searched her name in the state database. She was a notary public based in Plano, a friend of my mother's from her bridge club. I zoomed in on the notary block. Acknowledged before me this 14th day of November. Linda Mertz had not been in that hospital room. I was certain of it. It had just been my parents, which meant my father had taken the signed paper to her later, and she had notarized it without witnessing the signature. That was notary fraud. Another felony to add to the list. I had enough to go to the police right now. I had enough to have them arrested before the rehearsal dinner appetizers were served. But I needed more. I needed them to say it. I needed the intent recorded in their own voices, stripping away any defense of misunderstanding or accident. I picked up my phone. I hit the button to record the call, a feature I had installed on my secure line years ago. I dialed my father's number. He answered on the second ring, sounding breathless and buoyant. "Hully, we are just checking into the hotel. The suite is incredible. You should see the view of the skyline. I am looking at the papers." "Dad," I said. I kept my voice soft, trembling slightly. I needed to sound like the victim they wanted me to be. I needed to sound defeated. "I am looking at the closing documents for the house." "Oh, right," he said, his tone shifting to a dismissive, business-like cadence. "Well, it is done, Polly." The wire hit. We paid the venue. It is non-refundable. "But, Dad," I paused, letting a ragged breath hitch in my throat. "The signature on the power of attorney. I do not remember signing this." "Do not be dramatic," he snapped. "You signed it at the hospital. You were perfectly lucid. You knew we needed to handle your affairs while you were incapacitated." "I thought it was for medical insurance," I said. "Mom said it was for the insurance." "It was for whatever we needed it to be for." My mother's voice cut in from the background, shrill and defensive. "We are your parents, Hully. We know what is best. You were lying there helpless. Who do you think took care of you? Who drove you to the ER? You owe us that trust." "But that was 2 years ago," I said. "I am not helpless now." "Why did you use it today?" "Because we had to," my father shouted, losing his patience. "Because you are selfish. Because you sit on that pile of money in that empty house while your sister cries herself to sleep because she cannot have the wedding she deserves. We did what a family does. We redistributed the resources." "Redistributed," I repeated like a tax. "Call it what you want." He said, "It is legal. We have the paper. You signed it. Hey, Hully, The voice was smooth, oily, and dripping with condescension. Mason, Mason, I said. Are you there, too? Yeah, just helping the in-laws get settled, he said. I could hear the grin in his voice. Look, I know you are upset. It is a shock, but honestly, you should thank us. We sold that Garland property at the peak of the market. Cash buyer, 10-day close. You would have sat on that equity for another 10 years doing nothing. We unlocked the value. It is basic economics. You logged into my accounts, Mason. I said 3 nights ago at 3:00 in the morning. There was a silence on the line, a sharp, sudden vacuum of sound. I do not know what you are talking about, he said, but his voice had lost its swagger. It was tighter now. I am a real estate professional. I facilitated the sale of the asset. That is it. You moved the money in chunks. I continued, pressing just enough to make him sweat. $9,000 at a time. Why did you do that, Mason? I advised your father on best practices for liquidity. He said quickly, too quickly. Look, Holly, do not try to make this into something it is not. You are embarrassed because your little sister is getting the spotlight and you are lashing out. Just come to the wedding, drink some champagne, and get over it. We are family. You cannot sue family. Is that what you think? I asked. I know it, Mason said. Because if you try to make a scene, if you try to drag this into court, you are only going to humiliate yourself. You signed the POA. The house is sold. The money is spent. Game over. Okay, I whispered. Okay, Mason. Glad we understand each other. He said, see you tomorrow. The line went dead. I saved the recording. I labeled it Confession Inducement Structuring Wave. My hands were not trembling. They were steady as stone. I looked around my home office. It was quiet, organized, safe. They thought they had violated this space. They thought they had reached in and taken what was theirs by right of blood. But they had missed the most important detail, the detail that was currently staring me in the face on the settlement statement open on my screen. I looked at the property address 412 Oak Creek Lane. I looked at the seller name, Holly James. Then I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out the thick leather binder where I kept my corporate records. I turned to the tab marked Assets. I pulled out the original warranty deed for the Garland property grant Seabaroo's Holdings, LLC. I turned to the operating agreement for Seabaroo's Holdings, LLC. Section 4, Paragraph 2, Authority of Managers. The manager shall have the sole authority to manage the affairs of the company. However, the sale, exchange, or other disposition of all or substantially all of the company's assets shall require the unanimous written consent of all members. I am the manager. I am the sole member. My father had signed the closing documents as Gordon James, attorney in fact for Holly James, but Holly James did not own the house. The LLC owned the house. A power of attorney for an individual does not pierce the corporate veil. It does not grant the agent the authority to sign for a company even if that individual owns the company to sell that house legally. My father would have needed a corporate resolution signed by me specifically authorizing him to act on behalf of Seabaroo's Holdings, LLC. He did not have that. He did not even know the LLC existed, and the title company. The title company had committed a catastrophic error. They had run a title search, seen the name Seabaroo's Holdings, and somehow through incompetence or Mason's smooth-talking pressure, accepted a personal POA to sell a corporate asset. They had failed to ask for the operating agreement. They had failed to ask for a certificate of good standing. They had insured a title that was void ab initio, void from the beginning. The people who had bought the house, they did not own it. The money my parents had received, it was proceeds from the sale of stolen goods. The closing Mason was so proud of, it was a nullity. And the best part, the mortgage on that house was still in the name of the LLC. My parents had sold the house for cash, but they had not paid off the underlying corporate debt because they did not know about the corporate bank account where the mortgage payments were drafted. They just took the check for the equity and ran. They had not just stolen from me. They had stolen from the buyer. They had defrauded the title insurance company. They had triggered a default clause in my commercial mortgage. They had built a bomb, lit the fuse, and were currently dancing on top of it, thinking it was a stage. I looked at the email again. Congrats on closing. A slow, dark smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of happiness. It was the smile of a hunter who realizes the prey has just run into a box canyon. "Okay," I said to the silence of the room, my voice barely a breath. "Let us see how far you want to take this." I reached for my keyboard. It was time to draft the preservation letters. The wedding was tomorrow, but the funeral for their freedom had already begun. The transition from victim to investigator is a shift in blood pressure. The weeping phase, if I ever had one, was skipped entirely. I entered the protocol phase. I sat in my ergonomic chair, the leather cool against my back, and dialed the number for the bank's fraud division. Not the customer service number on the back of the card, but the direct line for the Global Security Operations Center. I knew the number because I had worked a contract for them 3 years ago, helping to patch a vulnerability in their wire transfer verification system. When the operator answered, I did not waste time with pleasantries. "This is Hully James. I am reporting unauthorized access and fraudulent wire activity on accounts ending in 4,590 and 8,821. I am requesting an immediate freeze on all outbound transfers. I am also formally requesting the preservation of all access logs, device fingerprints, and session tokens associated with these accounts for the past 96 hours. The operator paused. "Ma'am, for a standard dispute, I need to transfer you to—" "I am not filing a standard dispute." I cut him off, my voice steady and metallic. "I am alleging a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and requesting a forensic hold. I need you to flag the IP address 172.16.254.1. I need you to isolate the session ID associated with the wire transfers initiated today, and I need you to notate that the authorization credentials were compromised via a fraudulent power of attorney document." There was a silence followed by the sound of typing, rapid frantic typing. "I have escalated your ticket to Tier 3 MS. James," the operator said, his tone shifting from bored to alert. "The accounts are frozen. No funds will leave the institution from this moment forward." "The funds that already left," I said. "Where are they?" "They cleared the domestica system." He said, "They are in the recipient bank. We can send a recall request, but if the funds have been withdrawn or moved again, it becomes a civil matter. Do not send the recall request yet." I said, "Excuse me. If you recall the funds, the recipient gets notified." I explained. "I do not want them notified. I want them to feel safe. Just freeze my side. Preserve the evidence. I will handle the retrieval." I hung up. I did not want my father to get a notification that the bank was clawing the money back. Not yet. I wanted him to spend it. I wanted him to stand in that hotel lobby and pay for the orchids and the champagne. Every dollar he spent was another nail in the coffin of his defense. If he returned the money, it was a mistake. If he spent it, it was theft. I printed the call log. Then I grabbed my keys. 40 minutes later, I was walking into a glass-walled office in downtown Dallas. The sign on the door read Klein Associates Asset Recovery and Litigation. Marianne Klein was a shark in a silk blouse. She had handled a title dispute for a colleague of mine a few years back, dismantling a squatter's claim with such surgical precision that the squatter ended up owing legal fees for the privilege of being evicted. I sat across from her, laying 3 documents on the polished walnut table: the PDF of the power of attorney, the closing email for the house, and the print out of the wire transfers. Marianne put on her glasses. She read in silence for 4 minutes. The only sound was the hum of the HVAC system and the distant traffic of Dallas. Finally, she looked up. Her expression was a mix of professional admiration and personal horror. "This is a mess, Hully," she said. "I know." "No, I mean this is a masterpiece of incompetence," she corrected. She tapped the power of attorney with a manicured fingernail. "Let us start here. This document was notarized 2 years ago in Texas. A durable power of attorney is valid until revoked." "Yes, but look at the signature block. The notary states she witnessed your signature, but you were in post hoc recovery. Unless this notary was scrubbing in with the surgeon, she falsified the acknowledgement. That voids the instrument." "I can prove I was in the hospital." I said, "I have the admission records." "That is the first felony," Marianne said, counting on her fingers. "Second, the house. You say the property is held in an LLC. Seabrew's Holdings LLC. Marianne laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Then your father sold the Brooklyn Bridge. He cannot sell what he does not own. The title company is going to have a heart attack when we serve them. They insured a transaction based on a fraudulent chain of title. They will be on the hook for the buyer's loss, and they will go after your father to recoup it. And the money, I asked. The money is the least of their problems. Marianne said, this is wire fraud. It is bank fraud. It is title fraud. And because they did it to fund a wedding, it establishes clear motive and intent. They cannot claim insanity. They planned this. She leaned forward. What do you want to do, Holly? We can file an emergency injunction. I can have a judge sign a temporary restraining order by 500. We can have the police at the Larchmont tomorrow morning to arrest them before they cut the cake. I looked at the documents. I thought about Tesser's voice on the phone. So happy, so oblivious. I thought about Mason's arrogance. No, I said. Marianne raised an eyebrow. No, if we arrest them now, they play the victim. I said, they will say it was a misunderstanding. They will say they intended to pay me back. They will cry to the family that I ruined the wedding over a clerical error. I do not want them to be martyrs. I want them to be undeniable criminals. So we let them spend it. I said, we let them finish the crime. I want the wedding to happen. I want Mason to toast to his success. I want the vendors to cash the checks. And while they are doing that, I want to build a case so watertight that even God himself could not acquit them. Marianne smiled. It was a terrifying smile. I like the way you think. Okay, we file the preservation letters today. We put the banks and the title company on notice to hold all records, but we do not serve the lawsuit until Monday morning. Monday is perfect, I said. One more thing, Marianne said, sliding a notepad toward me. The access, you said they logged into your accounts remotely. How a power of attorney is a piece of paper. It does not give them your password. I paused. That was the variable I had not fully isolated yet. I am working on that. Find out, she said, if they hacked you. That is a whole other layer of federal statutes. If you gave them the password, it muddies the waters. I never gave them the password, I said firmly. Then find out how they got in. I left her office with a retainer agreement signed and a war chest of legal advice. I drove back to Frisco in silence, my mind racing. Marianne was right. The power of attorney explained the bank transfer authorization, but it did not explain the access. To initiate the transfer, they needed to log into my online banking. They needed my username, they needed my password, and they needed to bypass the two-factor authentication. I arrived home and went straight to my server rack. I pulled up the raw packet data from the intrusion. I had the IP address 172.16.254.1. I ran a geolocation trace. It resolved to a commercial internet service provider in Plano, specifically a dedicated fiber line registered to Vail Reilly Group, Mason's office. That explained the where. Now I needed the when. I cross-referenced the login time stats with the social media activity of my family. I pulled up Instagram. I searched for Tesser's handle. She is a chronic oversharer. If she eats a bagel, the internet knows about it. I scrolled back 3 days. There was a story highlight labeled Wedding Prep. I clicked through. Frame 1, Tesser trying on shoes. Frame 2, Tesser and Mum drinking mimosas. Frame 3, a selfie of Tesser and Mason in an office. I froze the video. I zoomed in on the metadata. The timestamp was 2:15 in the afternoon on Tuesday, the exact minute the first login attempt occurred on my bank account. In the background of the selfie, over Mason's shoulder, was a whiteboard, and next to the whiteboard was a laptop, my old laptop. I recognized it instantly. It was a MacBook Air I had given to my mother 3 years ago. When I upgraded, I had wiped it clean, reformatted the drive, and set it up as a new machine for her so she could browse recipes and use Facebook. Why was my mother's laptop at Mason's office? I looked closer at the screen of the laptop in the photo. It was blurry, but I could make out a specific icon in the menu bar, a blue double arrow. Team Viewer. It is a remote support tool. We use it to fix computers from a distance. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. 6 months ago, my mother had called me frantic. "Holly, the computer you gave me is so slow it keeps freezing. I cannot open the emails for the venue." I was busy. I was in the middle of a security audit. "Mom, I cannot come over right now." I had said, "Well, Mason said he could help." She had replied, "He said there is a program I can download so he can look at it from his office and clean it up for me." "Is that safe?" "If it is Mason, surely it is fine," I had said. "Just do not let strangers do it." I had authorized it. I had given permission for the fox to enter the henhouse because I was too busy to check the lock myself. Mason had installed remote access software on my mother's laptop, but that was her laptop. How did that get him into my accounts? Then it hit me. The keychain, when I wiped that laptop 3 years ago. Did I sign out of iCloud? Yes. Did I reformat the drive? Yes. But my mother uses the same password for everything, and she asked me to set up her browser. I had logged into Chrome to sync her bookmarks. Had I left my own Google profile signed in as a secondary user, I opened my current browser settings. I navigated to manage devices. There it was, MacBook Air. Last synced 3 days ago. I had not removed the device from my trusted list. It was a sleeper agent. Mason had likely found my old user profile on the machine. Or perhaps he realized that the browser had cached my passwords from years ago. Or more likely, he used the forgot password feature, and because the laptop was a trusted device in Google's eyes, it bypassed the SMS verification and sent the reset code to the email that was already open on the screen. He had not hacked the bank. He had hacked my digital hygiene. He had used my mother's incompetence and my own oversight to tunnel into my life. I watched the Instagram story again. Tessa was laughing. Mason was smiling, looking at the camera, but his hand was resting on that laptop. He was literally stealing my fortune while posing for a selfie with my sister. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. I saved the video. I saved the metadata. I took a screenshot of the managed devices screen showing the login from Mason's office IP. I had him. I had the digital smoking gun that placed him at the keyboard at the exact moment the money moved. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marianne. "Reservation letter sent. The trap is set. Do not engage. Let them think they won." I looked at the clock. It was 7:00 in the evening. The rehearsal dinner was happening right now. They were probably toasting to the future. They were probably laughing about how easy it was. I walked to my closet and pulled out the dress I had selected earlier, the navy blue sheath. I held it up. They wanted me to be the backup daughter. They wanted me to be the silent financier. I would go to the wedding. I would sit in the pew. I would drink their champagne. I would smile at the camera. I would be the ghost at the feast. And when they asked me why I was so calm, why I was not screaming about the money, I would just tell them I was happy for Tessa. Because I was happy she was having a wedding she would never forget. A wedding that would end not with a honeymoon, but with an indictment. I packed my bag, not with clothes, but with a backup drive, a voice recorder, and a high-resolution camera. "Professional mode is on," I whispered. I turned off the lights in my office. The blue glow of the monitors faded to black, but the recording light stayed on. The Larfmont Dallas smells like old money and fresh lees. It is a scent designed to make you forget that you are burning cash at a rate of $500 a minute. As I stepped into the ballroom, the sensory overload was immediate. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a fractured diamond-hard light over the crowd. There were walls of white hydrangeas, a string quartet playing a sanitized version of a pop song in the corner, and a champagne tower that defied the laws of physics. To anyone else, this was a fairy tale. To me, it was a crime scene. Every orchid was a withdrawal from my high-yield savings account. The imported silk tablecloths were my stock portfolio. The open bar currently being assaulted by my Uncle Bob was the liquidation of my emergency fund. I was not looking at a wedding. I was walking through the autopsy of my financial life. I wore the navy sheath dress. I had pinned my hair back in a severe tight bun. I wore no jewelry except for a simple watch. I did not come here to sparkle. I came here to witness the evidence. My parents were standing near the entrance acting as the gatekeepers of the gala. My father, Gordon, wore a tuxedo that fit him surprisingly well, likely a rental he had upgraded with the surplus from the house sale. My mother, Pamela, was in a shimmering silver gown that was slightly too young for her, her face flushed with the intoxication of being the center of attention. They spotted me. For a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of apprehension in my father's eyes, a primal fear that the sleeping dragon had woken up. But when he saw my calm face, the fear evaporated, replaced by a smug, self-satisfied warmth. "Hully," he boomed, stepping forward to embrace me. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. "You made it. I told your mother you would come around. Look at this place. Have you ever seen anything like it?" "It is impressive, Dad," I said, my voice neutral. I allowed him to hug me. It felt like being embraced by a pickpocket who had already taken your wallet, but wanted to check your other pocket just in case. "We did good, didn't we?" he whispered in my ear. A conspiratorial confession. Tessa is over the moon. This is what she needed, a fresh start. And honestly, the market timing on that garland place was a miracle. We got out just in time. He really believed it. That was the terrifying part. He had rewritten the narrative so completely that in his mind he was a financial genius, not a felon. "The timing was certainly interesting," I said, pulling away. My mother fluttered over, pressing a glass of champagne into my hand. "Oh, Hully, you look very professional. I wish you had worn something a bit more festive, maybe some sequins, but I suppose you always prefer to blend in." "I am comfortable, Mom," I said. "Where is Tessa?" "She is doing photos on the terrace with Mason," she said, beaming. "They look like royalty. Go say hello. And please, Hully, for tonight, just let us be happy. No talk of business, no talk of banks, just family." "Of course," I said. I would not dream of ruining the mood. I moved into the room. I did not go to the terrace immediately. Instead, I began my patrol. I took my phone out, holding it casually, but the camera was active. I snapped photos of the details, the menu cards embossed with gold leaf, the personalized party favors, the sprawling buffet of seafood that probably cost more than my first car. I needed to document the dissipation of the assets in a civil forfeit case or in a restitution hearing. Proving where the money went is half the battle. I found myself standing near a high-top table where a group of men in matching groomsmen's suits were loosening their ties. They were loud, already drunk, and radiating the kind of aggressive energy that comes from free alcohol. Mason was in the center of them. He looked every inch the successful groom. His teeth were white, his tan was spray-on perfect, and he was holding a glass of bourbon like a prop in a magazine ad. "I am telling you, bro, you just have to know when to pull the trigger," Mason was saying, his voice carrying over the music. "The market is soft, but if you have the right leverage, you can make things happen. We liquidated a property specifically for this. Cash close 48 hours, boom." "You are a legend," one of the friends said, slapping him on the back. "Most guys are drowning in debt for a wedding. You just conjure up cash." "It is all about asset management," Mason said, taking a sip. "You have to know where the equity is hiding." I stood 5 feet away, my back to them, listening. He was bragging about the theft. He was framing my hard-earned equity as his own clever asset management. Then a heavier-set man on the edge of the circle, who looked like he had started drinking before the ceremony, stumbled slightly and grabbed Mason's shoulder for support. To the man of the hour, the drunk man shouted. To Evan, "Hey, Evan, you did it, man." The air around the group froze for a microsecond. Mason's smile did not drop, but it stiffened. He grabbed the man's arm a little too hard. "It is Mason, buddy. Remember, we are in Dallas now. New city, new game. Right, Mason." The drunk man laughed, slurring his words. "My bad, Mason, Evan, whatever." To the groan, they clink-kicked glasses. I did not turn around. I did not react. But inside my mind, a red flag shot up the flagpole. Evan, why would a friend from his past call him Evan? Mason Vale was the name on the wedding invitation. Mason Vale was the name on the real estate license, or at least the name he claimed was on the license. I typed the name into my notes app. Evan, drunk friend, new city, new game. This was not just a nickname. The tension in Mason's jaw when he corrected his friend was visceral. It was the reaction of a man whose cover had been momentarily blown. I slipped away before they noticed me. I needed to find the bride. Tessa was standing near the chocolate fountain. Her dress, a massive cloud of white lace that took up 4 feet of space. She looked beautiful, I will admit that. But she also looked frantic. Her eyes were darting around the room, checking to see who was watching her, who was admiring her. She was feeding on the attention like a vampire. She saw me and squealed. Hully, she rushed over, or rather, she shuffled over as fast as the dress would allow. She threw her arms around me. "You came," she said against my ear. "I was so scared you would be mad and stay home." "I am here," I said. She pulled back, her hands resting on my shoulders. She looked at me with wide, imploring eyes. "I know Mom and Dad told you about the financing, and I know it was sudden. But Hully, look around. Look at this. Isn't it worth it? We are making memories. I knew you would understand. You are always the strong one. You can always make more money, right? But I only get one day." The entitlement was so pure, it was almost breathtaking. She honestly believed that my function in life was to be the renewable resource for her happiness. "I understand perfectly, Tessa," I said, and I meant it. I understood that she was a parasite. I understood that she was complicit. "Oh, thank you." She hugged me again. "Mason said you might be difficult, but I told him, no, Hully loves me. Hully wants me to be happy." "Is Mason happy?" I asked. "Oh, he is stressed." She laughed. "He has been on the phone all day with some bank stuff. Even on our wedding day, he is such a workaholic, just like you." "Bank stuff," I repeated. "Yeah, something about a wire transfer getting stuck. I do not know. He told me not to worry about it." My pulse quickened. "Well, do not let it ruin your night," I said. "Go dance." She twirled away, lost in her own fantasy. I retreated to the edge of the ballroom near the service entrance. I needed a moment to process the Evan comment. I watched the servers moving in and out with trays of orders. They looked exhausted. 2 men in suits, not guests but management, were standing near the kitchen door, holding a clipboard and a tablet. They were whispering intensely. I have excellent hearing, and I know how to read lips when the audio is muddy. I moved closer, pretending to examine a floral arrangement. The wire hit the operating account, but the flag came up an hour ago. The taller manager was saying compliance is asking for the source verification. "The client is the father," the other manager replied. "Gordon James, I know that." The tall one snapped, "But the originating account on the trace is not Gordon James. The alert says the funds originated from a suspicious bulk transfer, and the title company just pinged the system. They are saying the property sale that funded this event might have a title defect." "Jesus," the second manager hissed. "The food is already served. The band is playing. We are $80,000 deep in hard costs. Does the card on file work? We tried to run the incidental hold for $5,000 just now. Declined. Declined. Card is dead, frozen." I sipped my champagne. My call to the fraud department had worked. The freeze I initiated had cascaded through the system. When I reported the unauthorized access and the fraudulent nature of the transfers, the bank's algorithm likely traced the large outflows and flagged the recipient account's my father's account as high risk. And if my father's account was flagged, his debit card was a paperweight. The venue managers were panicking. They had a 6F Figurura event running on fumes, and the payment method had just turned into a pumpkin. "Do we stop the service?" the second manager asked. "No," the tall one said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We cannot stop a wedding in the middle. We will sue them tomorrow if we have to. Just get the groom in the office as soon as the cake is cut. We need a new card, a valid one." I turned away, hiding a smile. They were going to pull Mason or Evan into the office. They were going to ask for money, and he was not going to have it. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The DJ's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for the speeches." I found my seat at table 19. It was in the back near the kitchen. Of course, the backup daughter gets the backup table. My father took the microphone. He stood in the center of the dance floor, bathed in a spotlight. He looked the part of the benevolent patriarch. "Welcome, everyone," he said, his voice booming. "When I look around this room, I see love. I see family. You know, Raising two daughters is not easy." He paused for laughter. There was a polite ripple. But when Tessa came to us and said she found the one, her mother and I knew we had to make this day perfect. We wanted to give her the world, and we did. He gestured grandly to the room. We moved mountains to make this happen. We sacrificed. We planned, and we made it work because that is what parents do. He was taking credit for the heist. He was literally standing on a stage bragging about his devotion while spending money he had stolen from his other daughter while she was unconscious in a hospital bed. And to my son-in-law, Mason, my father continued, raising his glass. A young man with vision, a man who knows how to close a deal. Mason stood up and waved. That shark-like grin plastered on his face. I raised my phone and zoomed in on Mason's face. I snapped a photo. It was a perfect shot. The lighting hit his eyes, showing the triumph, the arrogance, the absolute certainty that he had gotten away with it. I looked at the image on my screen. "Smile, Evan," I whispered. I saved the photo to the Project Family folder. The speeches ended. The music swelled. The dance floor filled with people who had no idea they were dancing on a crime scene. I sat there calm and still in the chaos. I had the Evan lead. I had the venue's financial panic. I had the confession of intent for my father's speech. I had the photos of the lavish spending to prove the dissipation of assets. My father walked past my table on his way to the bar. He stopped and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Having fun, Holly?" he asked. "Lighten up. It is a party." "I am having a very illuminating evening, Dad," I said. Thud. He said, not listening. "See, it all worked out." He walked away. I looked across the room at Mason. He was spinning Tessa on the dance floor. He looked like a man who owned the world. "Enjoy the champagne, Mason. Enjoy the applause, because tomorrow the hangover is going to be federal." I took one last look at the happy couple, then picked up my purse. I had enough. The investigation was moving from observation to action. I needed to know who Evan was, and I needed to know it before the sun came up. I walked out of the ballroom, leaving the noise and the lies behind me. The cool night air of Dallas hit my face. I pulled out my phone and opened the background-checked software I use for work. Search query Evan plus real estate plus fraud plus Texas. The search bar blinked. I promised myself right there on the curb of the Larchmont that by the time my parents woke up tomorrow morning, their perfect plan would be a prison cell. It was Tuesday evening, 3 days after the wedding at the Larchmont, when the illusion of their victory finally shattered. I was in my kitchen brewing a pot of jasmine tea and reviewing a packet capture log from a suspected phishing campaign at work. The house was quiet, the kind of heavy insulated silence that I paid a premium for. The blinds were drawn. The security system was armed in stay mode. Then the doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a rapid-fire assault on the button, followed by heavy pounding on the solid oak wood. I did not need to look at the security feed to know who it was, but I checked the tablet mounted on the wall anyway. The wide-angle lens distorted their faces, but the aggression was clear. My father, Gordon, was red-faced and pacing. My mother, Pamela, looked disheveled, her makeup smeared as if she had been crying. Tessa was standing behind them, looking less like a glowing bride and more like a frightened child. And Mason, or Evan, or whatever he was calling himself today, stood with his arms crossed, staring directly into the camera lens with a predatory intensity. They were not in Bora Bora. They were on my porch in Frisco. I picked up my phone and ensured the voice recorder app was running in the background. I checked the living room to make sure the domestic surveillance camera disguised as a smoke detector was active. Then I unlocked the door. I did not invite them in. They surged past me like a tide of bad decisions. "You have some nerve," my father bellowed, spinning around to face me before I had even closed the door. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" "I am making tea," I said calmly, walking past him into the living room. "Would anyone like a cup?" "Stop it," my mother screamed. She threw her purse onto my sofa, a sofa she had criticized last Thanksgiving for being too modern. "Stop acting like this is normal. We are at the airport." Holly, the airport. And the card was declined. Declined in front of everyone. "The platinum card?" I asked, sitting down in my armchair. "The one linked to the joint account you emptied." "It is frozen," Mason said, stepping forward. His voice was low, controlled, but there was a razor edge to it. He did not sit. He loomed. The bank said the account is under investigation for fraud. They said a report was filed by the primary account holder. That is you, Hully. I reported unauthorized activity. I said, because there was unauthorized activity. It was a loan. Tessa shouted. She was wearing a designer tracksuit. That probably cost more than my first laptop. We were going to pay you back. Mason has a deal closing next month. We were going to put it all back plus interest. Why do you have to be so dramatic? A loan implies consent. Tesser, I said, taking $300,000 without asking is not a loan. It is theft. We are family. My father roared. He was shaking. Family does not steal from family. We share resources. We needed the liquidity. You were just sitting on it. You were hoarding it while your sister needed a start in life. How can you be so selfish? I looked at him. This was the narrative they had constructed. I was the villain because I had boundaries. They were the heroes because they had needs. Sit down, Dad, I said. If we are going to talk, let us talk, but stop shouting. He glared at me, but the authority in my voice, the voice of someone who holds the keys to the jail cell, made him pause. He sat on the edge of the sofa. Fix this, he said. Call the bank right now. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you authorized the transfer. We need to get on that plane. We have reservations. We have deposits that we will lose if we do not show up. I cannot do that. I said you can and you will, Mason said. Because if you do not, this gets ugly. I turned my gaze to Mason. Is that a threat? It is a reality check, Mason said. He walked over to the mantel and picked up a framed photo of me graduating from college. He looked at it with disdain. You work in a sensitive field. Hully, cybersecurity, high clearance, lots of background checks. How do you think your employer would react if they heard you were having a mental breakdown? If they heard you were paranoid, delusional, filing false police reports against your own parents? Are you going to tell them that? I asked. I might have to. Mason shrugged. If you persist in this delusion that your family stole from you, I mean, think about how it looks. You gave your father power of attorney. You gave him access. Now you are suffering from buyer's remorse and trying to frame him. That sounds like instability to me. People with security clearances get suspended for less. It was a good angle. I had to give him credit. He knew exactly where to hit. He was gaslighting me on a professional level. Speaking of the power of attorney, I said, ignoring his threat and steering a conversation back to the evidence I needed. I have been looking at that document. The date is November 14th, 2 years ago. So what? My father snapped. It is valid. I was in the hospital that day. Dad, I said softly. I had just come out of surgery. I was on a morphine drip. I do not remember signing anything. Oh, please. My mother scoffed. You were fine. You were awake. Was I? I looked at my father. Dad, look at me. Was I really awake? Or did you put a pen in my hand while I was drifting in and out? You signed it. My father insisted, his defensive instinct overriding his common sense. You were lying there in the recovery room. I handed you the clipboard. I said, Hully, sign this so we can take care of the bills. You laughed. You were high as a kite, giggling at the ceiling tiles, but you grabbed the pen and you signed it. You said, sure, Daddy. Take care of everything. You trusted us then. Why don't you trust us now? I felt a cold rush of satisfaction. Gotcha. He had just admitted on a recording that I was under the influence of narcotics and not of sound mind when I executed the document. That made the power of attorney voidable. It made his use of it fraud. I was high as a kite, I repeated, confirming the statement. And you thought that was a good time to have me sign a legal instrument giving you control of my finances. We did it for your own good. My mother cried. Tears were streaming down her face. Now you are so ungrateful. We raised you. We fed you. And now you count pennies. You care more about your bank account than your sister's happiness. I care about the truth. Mom, I said, like the house in Garland. You sold it. Yes, we sold it, my father said. And we got a great price. You should be thanking Mason. He found a cash buyer in 24 hours. Who signed the deed? I asked. Did you take the power of attorney to the title company? Of course I did, my father said. I signed as your agent. It was all legal. The title company approved it. Mason handled the paperwork. I see, I said. And Mason, did you tell the title company that the property was owned by an LLC, or did you let them think it was owned by me personally? Mason's eyes narrowed. The smugness faltered for a fraction of a second. The title company did their own research. It is not my job to do their due diligence. But you knew, I pressed. You knew I held that property in a company name. It is all the same pot of money. Ali, Mason said, waving his hand dismissively. LLC, personal, whatever. It is your asset. Your father had your power. Stop splitting hairs to try and ruin this wedding. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. He tossed it onto the coffee table. Here, Mason said, this is a statement of non-prosecution and a letter to the bank authorizing the retroactive transfers. Sign it. We take this to the branch tomorrow morning. They lift the freeze and we go on our honeymoon. You get your money back over the next 5 years. Everyone wins. And if I do not sign, then we go to war, Mason said. And I promise you, Holly, you are alone. We are a family unit. It is 4 against 1. Who are the police going to believe, the loving parents and the newlyweds? Or the bitter, lonely spinster sister who is off her meds? My mother looked at me with wet, pleading eyes. Just sign it, Holly. Please do not embarrass us. Do not make this into a crime. If you sign it, we can forget this ever happened. I looked at the paper. It was a confession of my own incompetence. It was a lie that would exonerate them and leave me with nothing but a promise of repayment from people who had just proven they could not be trusted with a lunch order, let alone a payment plan. I stood up. Get out, I said. Tesser gasped. Get out of my house, I said. I am not signing anything. I am not calling the bank, and I am certainly not forgetting this. You are making a huge mistake, my father said, standing up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. You are cutting yourself off from this family. If you do this, Holly, do not expect us to be there for you when you fall, and you will fall. I have been catching myself for 37 years, Dad. I said, I think I will be fine. You are heartless, my mother spat, grabbing her purse. Absolutely heartless. Let us go, Mason said. He looked at me with cold, dead eyes. She wants to play hardball, fine. We will see how she likes it when the rumors start flying at her office on Monday. They filed out. The door slammed shut with a finality that shook the windows. I locked the deadbolt. I checked the security panel. Then I exhaled, a long shuddering breath that I had been holding for 20 minutes. I walked back to the living room. I picked up my phone. I stopped the recording. I opened my laptop and immediately uploaded the audio file to the encrypted cloud server I shared with Marianne Klein. I sent her a text. They came. They confessed to the hospital state. They threatened blackmail. File is in the Dropbox. Marianne replied instantly. Received. This is gold. Do not answer the door again. I sat down in the silence. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a metallic taste in my mouth. They were so convinced of their own righteousness. They truly believed that their need for luxury trumped my right to security. My computer pinged with a new email notification. It was not from Marianne. It was from the property management software I used for the Garland house. Subject: urgent inquiry from occupant buyer. I opened it. The email was from a man named David Ross, the man who thought he had bought my house 3 days ago. Dear Ms. James or current owner, I am contacting you because I just had a very disturbing conversation with my title insurance agent. I moved into the property at 412 Oak Creek Lane yesterday. Today, a process server showed up looking for Seabaroo's Holdings LLC regarding a mortgage default notice. The agent says there is a lien on the house that was not cleared at closing. I paid cash for this house. Why is there still a mortgage? And why does the deed I received list your father's name as agent, but the mortgage company says they do not recognize his authority? Please call me immediately. I have a wife and a 6-month-old baby in this house, and I need to know what is going on. I stared at the screen. My parents had sold the house for cash. They had pocketed the check. They had not paid off the existing mortgage because they did not know about the corporate bank account where the automatic payments were drawn from. They just took the money and ran. And now an innocent family, a man with a wife and a baby, was sitting in a house they thought they owned, while the bank was preparing to foreclose on the LLC they had never heard of. My parents had not just stolen from me. They had sold a lie to a stranger. I felt a surge of cold fury. This was no longer just a family dispute. This was collateral damage. I had replied, "Mr. Ross, I am the manager of Seabaroo's Holdings, LLC. I did not sell you that house. My signature was forged and the title transfer is fraudulent. You are a victim of a crime. Do not move out. I have an attorney. We are going to fix this, but you need to secure your own counsel immediately. The people who sold you that house are currently at the Lark Hotel. Their names are Gordon James and Mason Vale." I hit send. Then I poured my tea down the sink. I did not want tea anymore. I wanted justice, and I was going to serve it cold. The text message arrived at 8:30 in the morning on Thursday. It was from Tesser Coffee. The roasted bean on Preston 30 minutes. "Just me and Mason, please. Hully, we need to fix this." I looked at the phone. The roasted bean was less than a mile from my house. It was a public space, high traffic with security cameras covering the entrance and the point of sale counter. It was neutral ground. I did not reply immediately. I let 10 minutes pass in a negotiation. Promptness can be interpreted as anxiety. When I finally typed K, I was already dressed in my work armor, a charcoal blazer, and a silk blouse at the neck. I was not going to meet my sister. I was going to meet a hostile party. I arrived exactly 2 minutes late. It is a subtle power move. When you are late, the other party spends those minutes looking at the door, their anxiety spiking with every person who enters who is not you. By the time you arrive, they are already off balance. They were sitting at a small round table in the back corner. Mason was wearing a suit, but the crispness was gone. His tie was loosened, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Tesser looked small. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, clutching a venti latte like it was a life raft. I did not buy a drink. I walked straight to the table and sat down. "You have 10 minutes," I said. I placed my phone face down on the table. Mason cleared his throat. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table toward me. It was a spreadsheet printed in color with neat columns and a graph at the bottom. "I stayed up all night working on this," Mason said, his voice projecting a forced calm. "It is a repayment schedule. 5 years. We did the math, Hully. We can pay you back everything. Principal, interest, it is all there." I looked at the paper without touching it. The title read, "Family Asset Restructuring Plan. Monthly payments," I read aloud, "starting in 6 months. We need time to stabilize," Mason said quickly. "The wedding costs, the honeymoon, once we are back and I close these 2 deals in the pipeline, the cash flow will be consistent. We are talking about $5,000 a month. You will have your money back before you are 45. And in exchange," I asked, looking up, "what do I have to do to activate this generous offer of receiving my own stolen money back over half a decade?" Mason leaned in. "You call the bank today. You tell them you authorize the transfers. You tell them the fraud report was a misunderstanding caused by a miscommunication within the family. You lift the freeze." I stared at him. The audacity was almost impressive. It was the kind of confidence that usually comes with a psychopathy diagnosis. "Let me clarify," I said, my voice low. "You want me to call a federally insured financial institution and lie to their fraud department? You want me to tell them that I voluntarily gave you $300,000, thereby making me an accessory to your money laundering?" "It is not lying," Tesser whispered. "It is just fixing it." "It is perjury," I corrected, "and it is filing a false police report. If I retract the statement now, you are asking me to commit a crime to cover up your crime. It is the only way you get paid." "Ully," Mason said, his tone hardening. He tapped the spreadsheet. "Think about the alternative. You keep this freeze on. The bank claws back whatever is left, which is not much. By the way, they seize the accounts. Then what? You sue us. Do you know how long a civil suit takes in Texas? 2 years. 3. And even if you win, you cannot get blood from a stone. If you ruin my reputation, I lose my license. If I lose my license, I cannot earn. If I cannot earn, you get zero. I am willing to take that risk, I said. Mason laughed, a harsh, dry sound. Are you? Because I do not think you have thought this through. You are a private person, Holly. You like your quiet life. If you pursue this, I will make it my mission to make you famous. I will countersue for defamation. I will sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I will depose you. I will drag your medical records into court, including the ones from your surgery where you were on narcotics. I will paint a picture of a jealous, unstable sister who gave a gift and then tried to destroy a marriage because she's lonely and bitter. You would not, Tesser gasped, looking at Mason. I will do whatever I have to do to protect us, Mason said, not looking at her. His eyes were locked on mine. Litigation is expensive. Holly, I will drain you in legal fees. I will tie this up in motions and appeals until you wish you had never made that call. Or you can sign this paper, lift the freeze, and get $5,000 a month starting in July. It was a classic shakedown. He was banking on the idea that I was risk-averse. He thought I was a calculator who would look at the cost of conflict and decide it was cheaper to surrender. He did not know he was negotiating with someone who hunts predators for a living. I reached out and picked up the spreadsheet. I folded it meekly in half, then in half again. You have a very interesting definition of leverage, Mason. I said. I am a realist, he replied. A realist would know that threats only work if you have the high ground. I said. You think this is a he said, she said situation. You think it is your word against mine regarding the power of attorney. It is, he said. It is not, I said, because I am not relying on the power of attorney. I leaned forward. I have the server logs, Mason. He blinked. But I have the preservation files from Cobalt Gate Security. I lied smoothly. I did not need him to know it was my personal system. Invoking the company name made it sound bigger, scarier. I have the IP address logs from your Office 172.16.254.1. I have the device fingerprint of the MacBook Air you used. I have the session tokens. I know you logged in at 3:14 in the morning on Tuesday. I know you structured the transfers in batches of $9,000 to evade federal reporting requirements. Mason's face went pale. The blood drained out of him so fast it looked like a magic trick. I also have the audio recording of your conversation with your friend at the wedding. I continued, pressing the advantage. The one who called you Evan? His hand twitched. He knocked his spoon off the table. It clattered loudly on the concrete floor. Who is Evan? Mason, I asked softly. Does the Texas Real Estate Commission know about Evan? Does the background check I just ran on that name match the fingerprints you left on my bank account? He could not speak. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified look of an animal caught in a trap. Stop it. Tesser suddenly screamed, heads turned in the cafe. The barrister stopped grinding beans. Tesser slammed her hand on the table. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her sunglasses. She ripped them off. Her eyes were red and swollen. Stop it, Holly, she sobbed. Do you have to be so cruel? Do you have to be so perfect and cold all the time? You are destroying him. He destroyed himself. Tesser, I said. He stole from us. We needed the money, she cried. You do not understand. It wasn't just for the wedding, he told me. She gasped for air, her chest heaving. He told me if we didn't have the cash, we would be in trouble. Real trouble. Tesser, shut up. Mason hissed. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was white-knuckled. No. She pulled away. She needs to know, Holly. He said there were people he said he owed money from before from the business. He said if he didn't pay them by the wedding date, they were going to hurt him. They were going to hurt us. I froze. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with a deafening snap. The urgency, the cash sale of the house, the structuring of the transfers, the desperation to get the money immediately, the panic when the card was declined at the venue. This wasn't just greed. This was debt. Mason or Evan wasn't just a con artist living beyond his means. He was in the hole, deep in the hole, and the kind of people who threaten to hurt you if you don't pay by a specific date are not credit card companies. They are loan sharks or worse. Tesser, I said, my voice changing. The coldness dropped, replaced by an urgent, Sharp command. Who did he owe money to? I said, shut up. Mason stood up, knocking his chair over. He grabbed Tesser by the arm and yanked her upward. We are leaving. She is crazy. She is trying to trick you. Mason, let her go, I said, standing up. You have made your choice, Hully. Mason sat. He looked wild now, sweaty, frantic, dangerous. You want to play detective. Fine. But remember, if I go down, she goes down with me. She signed the checks, too. She spent the money, too. He dragged Tesser toward the door. She was stumbling, looking back at me with terror in her eyes. Tesser, I called out. Call me. They burst out the door and into the bright morning sun. I watched through the window as he shoved her into his car, a leased BMW that was probably 2 payments behind. I sat back down. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I picked up the spreadsheet Mason had left behind. I looked at the numbers again. 5,000 a month. It was a fantasy. He didn't have 5,000 a month. He probably didn't have $5. I realized then that I had miscalculated. I thought I was dealing with a family dispute involving a greedy brother-in-law. I wasn't. I was dealing with a desperate man who was running from a debt he couldn't pay, and he was using my sister as a human shield. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tesser sent from the car. I am scared. He is driving really fast. I typed back immediately. Do not say anything to him. Act calm. Meet me alone tonight. 700. The library parking lot. Park in the back. I needed to get her away from him, not to save the money. The money was gone, but because a man who is being hunted by loan sharks and cornered by the FBI is a man who has nothing left to lose. And those are the most dangerous men on earth. I stood up and gathered my things. I needed to call Marianne, and then I needed to call the contact I had in the Dallas Police Department. The fraud report was just the beginning. We needed a protective order. Evan, I whispered to myself as I walked to my car, let us see who you really are. I opened the background check app on my phone again. I entered the name Evan and the phrase gambling debt. The search wheel spun. It was time to stop waiting for the law to catch up. I had to separate the hostage from the captor before the bill came due. The name Mason Vale was a ghost story. It was a perfectly constructed fiction designed to pass a casual inspection, but under the harsh light of a forensic background check, it dissolved into vapor. I sat in Marianne Klein's conference room on Friday morning. The adrenaline from the confrontation at the coffee shop had settled into a cold, hard resolve. Marianne was projecting a digital dossier onto the wall. We had authorized a deep dive investigation using a private investigator's license, accessing databases that the general public does not know exist. Here is the problem, Marianne said, tapping her laser pointer on the screen. Mason Vale exists. There is a Mason Vale born in 1988 with a Social Security number issued in Ohio. He has a credit score of 720. He has no criminal record. So he is legitimate? I asked. No, Marianne said, because the real Mason Vale died in a car accident in Dayton, Ohio 4 years ago. The room went silent. I looked at the screen. The death certificate was there, grainy but legible. So, who is living in my parents' guest room? I asked. Marianne clicked the remote. A new image appeared. It was a mug shot. The lighting was harsh, the background a slate gray, but the face was unmistakable. The jawline was younger, the hair less styled, but the eyes, those predatory, calculating eyes, were identical to the man who had toasted to family at the Larkmont. Meet Evan Rohr, Marianne said. Age 39, last known address, Las Vegas, Nevada. I leaned forward, studying the enemy. Evan Rohr has a colorful history. Marianne recited from the file. Civil judgments for breach of contract, 2 restraining orders filed by former business partners, and a pending investigation by the Nevada Gaming Control Board for check kiting. He vanished from Vegas 18 months ago, right around the time Mason Vale started showing up at open houses in Dallas. He is a grifter, I said, a professional shapeshifter. He is an identity thief, Marianne corrected. He is using a dead man's credentials to build a credit profile, obtain a real estate license, and apparently marry your sister. Does he have a real estate license? I asked. Or is that fake, too? We checked with the Texas Real Estate Commission. Marianne said there is a license active for Mason Vale, but the photo on file. It is a low-resolution scan that looks vaguely like him, but if you look closely at the ear structure, which is like a fingerprint, it does not match Evan Raw. He likely used a fake ID to sit for the exam, or he bribed someone. Either way, every contract he has ever signed, every house he has ever sold, including your rental property in Garland, is fraud. I felt a wave of nausea. This was not just about $300,000 and more. This was about a predator who had embedded himself into the bloodstream of my family. I need to see Tesser, I said. She texted me. We are meeting tonight. Be careful, Marianne warned. Evan Rohr is cornered. He knows you are onto him. If he suspects you are turning Tesser against him, he could become volatile. He is already volatile, I said. He dragged her out of a coffee shop by her arm. That evening, I drove to the public library on the edge of town. It was a neutral location, well lit with security guards patrolling the perimeter. I parked in the back row under a halogen street lamp and waited. At 7:15, a gray sedan pulled up. It was not the BMW Mason Evan usually drove. It was a ride-share vehicle. Tesser stepped out. She looked like a fugitive. She was wearing a hoodie pulled up over her head, and she kept looking over her shoulder. She spotted my car and ran toward it, slipping into the passenger seat and locking the door immediately. She was shaking, visibly vibrating with fear. Did he follow you? I asked, checking my rear-view mirror. No, she said, her voice breathless. I told him I was going to the pharmacy for a migraine. He is drinking. He has been drinking since we left the coffee shop. Tesser, I said, turning to face her. I know who he is. She froze. What do you mean? His name is not Mason Vale, I said gently. His name is Evan Rahr. He is from Las Vegas, and he is using the dead man's identity. I expected her to deny it. I expected her to scream at me, to defend him, to tell me I was crazy. Instead, she slumped against the seat and let out a long, ragged sob. I knew it, she whispered. I blinked. You knew. I didn't know the name, she cried, wiping her nose with her sleeve. But I knew something was wrong. Nothing ever added up. Holly, he never has his wallet. He never lets me see the mail. He has 3 different phones, and he locks them all in a safe at night. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Because I was scared, she said, and because I wanted it to be true. I wanted the fairy tale. Mom and Dad were so happy that I finally found someone successful. I didn't want to be the screw-up again. I didn't want to be the one who brought home a con artist. So you let him rob us. I didn't know he was robbing you, she insisted. He told me he was moving assets. He said it was complex financial stuff. He made me sign papers. Holly, stacks of them. I didn't read them. He just said, sign here, babe. It is for our future. And then he took my passport. He has your passport. He has everything. She said my passport, my birth certificate, my social security card. He says he keeps them in a safety deposit box for safekeeping, but he won't tell me which bank. He manages all the accounts. He gives me an allowance, a cash allowance. Holly, like I'm a teenager. Tesser, I said, keeping my voice calm. Do you have anything of his? An idea? A credit card? I took a picture, she said, fumbling for her phone. A few weeks ago, he left his wallet on the dresser when he was in the shower. I looked inside. There was a driver's license. It looked weird. She pulled up the photo and handed me the phone. I zoomed in. It was a Texas driver's license with the name Mason Vale, but to the untrained eye, it looked perfect. To my eye, it was a sloppy forgery. The font used for the expiration date was Arial. The Texas Department of Public Safety uses a proprietary typeface that is much harder to replicate. The spacing between the V and the and Vale was off by 2 mm, and the hologram over the state seal lacked the correct refractive index. It looked flat in the photo. This is a fake, I said. He told me he had to get a replacement because he lost his old one, Tesser said. But he gets mail addressed to other names, too. Sometimes Evan, sometimes Eric. He burns the envelopes in the sink. Listen to me, I said, grabbing her hands. You are in danger. This man is not just a liar. He is running from debts he cannot pay. That is why he needed the money from the house. That is why he is desperate. He told me we have to leave on Sunday, she whispered. He said the honeymoon is off, and we are moving to Bai's. He said he has a business opportunity there. He wants me to pack tonight. You are not going to Bly's, I said firmly. You are going to a hotel. I will pay for it. You are not going back to that house. I have to. She panicked. If I don't go back, he will know. He will come for me. He threatened Dad. Ali. He said if the family turns on him, he has enough dirt on Dad's business dealings to send him to jail, too. Dad's business dealings are a separate issue. I said, right now, we need to get you safe, and I need you to do one thing for me. What? I need you to tell me exactly where he keeps his laptop. I said, and I need the passcode. It is 4,499. She said automatically. He thinks I don't know it, but I saw him type it in once. Good, I said. I dropped Tesser off at a hotel 3 towns over, paying cash for the room, so there would be no digital trail. I gave her a burner phone I had bought at a convenience store. Do not call Mom, I instructed. Do not call Dad. They are compromised. They will tell him where you are because they are still trying to save the wedding narrative. Talk only to me. She nodded, looking small and broken in the hotel lobby. I am sorry, Holly. I am so sorry. We will fix it, I said. I drove home, my mind racing. I had the ID verification. I had the witness testimony. Now I needed the money trail. I arrived home to an email from Marianne. Subject: forensic accounting update. The rabbit hole. I opened the attachment. Marianne had worked with a forensic accountant to trace the flow of funds from my father's account. The $300,000 had not stayed in my father's account. It had been wired out almost immediately, but not to a vendor. Transfer $150,000 to Global Consulting Group, LLC, Shell Company, Delaware. Transfer $275,000 to crypto exchange wallet ending in X993. Transfer $380,000 to the Lark Dallas wedding deposit. The rest was withdrawn in cash or spent on smaller transactions. But here was the twist. The forensic accountant had traced the Global Consulting Group account. It was a pass-through entity. The money went in, sat for 6 hours, and then was wired to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands and the crypto wallet. It had been active for months. The transaction history showed incoming payments from multiple sources, likely other victims, and outgoing payments to a known gambling syndicate based in Costa Rica. He is not investing, I whispered to the screen. He is paying off a bookie. The $80,000 for the wedding was just the cover charge. The real heist was the money he sent to the Caymans and the sports book. He had used my family's life savings to settle a gambling debt and stash a getaway fund. I picked up the phone and called Marianne. We have enough, I said. I agree. Marianne said, I have drafted the criminal referral. We are filing with the Dallas County District Attorney's Financial Crimes Division tomorrow morning. We are also filing a formal complaint with the Texas Department of Insurance regarding the title fraud. This is racketeering. Holly, it is RICO territory. What about the buyer? I asked. David Ross. I spoke to him, she said. He is devastated, but he is cooperating. I connected him with a tenant right shark who is going to file an emergency stay of eviction. He is not going anywhere, but he is willing to testify that your father and Mason presented themselves as the legal owners. Good, I said. One more thing, Marianne said. Since we filed the preservation letters, the banks are on high alert. If he tries to move a single cent, the bells will ring. I hung up. I felt a strange sense of calm. The net was closing. Then my computer pinged. It was a notification from my email, a high-importance alert from my primary bank, the one that had been drained. Subject: action required. Verify identity for emergency wire transfer. I froze. I opened the email. Dear customer, we have received a request for an immediate wire transfer of $40,000 from your home equity line of credit. Due to the recent security flag on your account, we require secondary voice verification. Please call this number immediately to authorize. He was trying to tap the equity line. He had realized the cash accounts were frozen. He had realized the family plan was crumbling. So now he was trying to borrow against the house I lived in. He must have found the Hellolock paperwork in my file cabinet when they raided my office digitally. He was trying to bleed me dry one last time before he ran to buys. I looked at the time stamp. The request was initiated 3 minutes ago. He was online right now. I did not call the bank to verify. I called the bank to track. "This is Holly James," I said when the fraud operator answered. "Someone is trying to initiate a wire from my HELOC. Do not block it yet. Tell me where the login is coming from." "One moment," the operator said. The request originated from a mobile device using a VPN. But wait, the VPN dropped for a second during the authentication handshake. "And we have a real IP," the operator said. "It is not in Frisco. It is in, let me check the coordinates. It is at the DFW International Airport, Terminal D." I slammed my hand on the desk. He wasn't waiting for Sunday. He was running now. "Block the transfer," I ordered, "and send those coordinates to the Dallas Police Department. Case number 4922. I grabbed my keys. The wedding was supposed to be the climax, but Evan Raw had decided to skip the reception. "You are not getting on that plane, Evan," I said, running to my car. "Not with my money." The conference room at Klein Associates was air-conditioned to a temperature that I found pleasant, but my parents clearly found freezing. It was Monday morning. The deposition was the first formal step in the civil suit I had filed to freeze the assets permanently and void the sale of the Garland property. My father, Gordon, sat across the mahogany table. He looked smaller than I remembered. The bluster from the wedding, the arrogance from the ambush at my house, it was all gone. He was wearing a suit that looked slept in, and his hands were shaking slightly as he reached for a glass of water. My mother sat next to him, staring at a point on the wall, refusing to make eye contact with me. "Mr. James," Marianne Klein began, her voice deceptively gentle, "you are under oath. Do you understand the penalties for perjury in the state of Texas?" "I understand," my father mumbled. "Let us discuss the transfer of funds on Tuesday the 20th. Marianne said you moved $300,000 from your daughter's accounts to your own. Did Holly James explicitly authorize this transaction on that specific day?" My father cleared his throat. He looked at his lawyer, a strip-mall generalist they had hired in a panic, who nodded fast. "Not on that day." "No," my father said, "but we had a standing verbal agreement, an understanding. Holly always said, 'What is mine is yours.' She told us years ago that if the family ever needed help, we should just take it. We were acting on that standing instruction." I sat perfectly still. It was a clumsy lie, the kind a child tells when caught with a hand in the cookie jar. "A verbal agreement," Marianne repeated, writing it down. "And this agreement superseded the written banking protocols." "Yes," my father said, gaining a little confidence. "We are family. We do not need contracts for everything." Holly agreed to this. She knew we were doing it. Marianne picked up a tablet. She tapped the screen. "I would like to play Exhibit C. This is a recording taken on the evening of the 24th inside M.S. James's residence." My father's face went gray. He remembered the conversation. He just did not know it had been recorded. The audio filled the room, my voice calm and questioning. Then my father's voice, loud and defensive. "You signed it. You were lying there in the recovery room. You were high as a kite, giggling at the ceiling tiles." Marianne stopped the recording. "Mr. James," she said, "in your own words, you described your daughter as high as a kite when she signed the power of attorney. You admitted she was under the influence of narcotics. Yet today you claimed she had a clear, standing verbal agreement. Which is it? Was she a lucid partner in this transaction, or was she an incapacitated patient you took advantage of?" "I was using a figure of speech," he stammered. Sweat was beating on his forehead. "She knew." She smiled. "We have the medical logs from the hospital," Marianne continued, sliding a thick stack of papers across the table. "At the exact time you claim this document was signed, Holly had been administered a dose of Dilaudid, a powerful opioid. A forensic psychiatrist has reviewed these logs and submitted an affidavit stating that no individual under such dosage could possess the legal capacity to enter into a contract." My mother let out a small strangled sob. My father looked down at his hands. The verbal agreement defense had just died in the water, but we were not done. The door opened, and a woman in a sharp gray suit walked in. She was Dr. Aris Thorne, a forensic document examiner. She set up a tripod and a large poster board. "This is an enlargement of the signature on the power of attorney," Dr. Thorne explained, pointing to the jagged, looping scroll that read Holly James. "And this next to it is a standard sample of Ms. James' signature from tax returns and checks signed prior to the surgery. Note the tremor here, Dr. Thorne said, pointing to the tail of the Y. "This is not a stylistic flourish. This is a neuromuscular tremor consistent with chemical impairment or extreme physical distress. The pen pressure varies wildly. The slant is inconsistent. This was not signed by a person in control of their motor functions. It was signed by a person whose hand was likely being guided or supported by another." She looked directly at my father. "In my professional opinion, this signature was obtained under duress or while the signatory was medically compromised. It is not a voluntary mark." The silence in the room was absolute. My father shrank into his chair. He knew the game was up. He had tried to rewrite history, but science and data were rewriting it back. Then came the title company. Their representative was not in the room, but their legal counsel was on speakerphone. They sounded terrified. "We have conducted an internal audit regarding the notary. Ms. Linda Mertz," the title company lawyer said. "It appears Ms. Mertz did not personally witness the signing of the power of attorney in the hospital as required by law. She admitted yesterday that Mr. James brought the document to her house later that evening, and she notarized it as a favor. We are initiating proceedings to revoke her commission. Furthermore, because the underlying POA is void, our title insurance policy is effectively triggered. We are facing a total loss on the claim from the buyer." My father's lawyer put his head in his hands. Notary fraud. It was a state jail felony, and Linda Mertz, to save her own skin, had just given my father up. "We are done for today," Marianne said, closing her folder. "We will reconvene tomorrow. I suggest you use the evening to consider a plea deal, gentlemen, because right now you are looking at prison time." My parents left the room without looking at me. They looked like ghosts. But the battle was not just legal. It was social. As I drove home, my phone started buzzing with notifications from the neighborhood group chat and the Nextdoor app. I usually ignored these digital cesspools of gossip, but a text from a neighbor alerted me. "Ali, is it true you are evicting your parents? People are saying some awful things." I opened the app. There it was, a post from a user named Concerned Friend, an account created 2 days ago. It is heartbreaking to see a wealthy child turn on their elderly parents over a simple misunderstanding. The James family has lived here for 30 years. Now, their daughter Holly is suing them because she regrets helping with her sister's wedding. She is even threatening to have her own father arrested. Greed is an ugly thing. The comments were pouring in. "Ungrateful brat. I always knew she was cold. Poor Gordon and Pam." It was Mason or Evan. This was his style. He could not win in court. So he was trying to win in the court of public opinion. He wanted to shame me into dropping the lawsuit. He wanted to make me a pariah in my own community so that I would retreat. He underestimated how little I care about the opinions of strangers. I screenshotted every post. I traced the IP address of the Concerned Friend account. It resolved to a Starbucks in Plano, the one right next to the hotel where my parents and Mason were staying. I drafted a cease and desist letter. I did not send it to the fake account. I sent it directly to Mason's attorney and my parents' attorney to counsel your client. Mason Vale Evan Rohr is currently engaging in a campaign of defamation and harassment via social media. We have traced the post to his location. Be advised that we are adding a count of liable and intentional infliction of emotional distress to the complaint. Every post he makes adds $10,000 to the damages we will seek. Govern yourselves accordingly. Within 20 minutes, the post was deleted, but the real collapse happened at 6:00 that evening. I was in my kitchen eating a salad I could barely taste. When my burner phone rang, it was Tesser. "Holly," she said. Her voice sounded hollow, like she had been hollowed out by grief and shock. "I am at the county clerk's office. They just closed." "What were you doing there?" I asked. "I went to get a copy of the marriage license," she said. Mason Evan, he told me he filed it the day after the wedding. He said he handled it, but I needed it to change my name on my Social Security card. I stopped eating. I knew what was coming. They do not have it, do they? I asked. No, Tesser whispered. They searched the whole database. There is no record of a marriage between Tesser James and Mason Vale. There is no record for Evan Raw either. We are not married. Hully, the efficient. He was Mason's friend, the one from the bar. It was all fake. He did not file it because he did not want a paper trail, I said, and because he knew he was going to run. If he was legally married to you, it would be harder to disappear. He left himself an escape hatch. I am just a prop, Tesser said, her voice breaking. I am not a wife. I am just part of his cover story. Where are you now? I am in the hotel parking lot, she said. He is inside. He is packing. He thinks we are leaving for Baez tomorrow morning. He thinks I am running errands. Do not go back into that room, I commanded Tesser. Listen to me. If you go back in there, you might never come out. He is desperate. The bank blocked his wire transfer from my house yesterday. He is out of money. He is cornered. I have his bag, she said suddenly. But I have his gym bag. He threw it in the trunk of the rental car this morning. He told me never to touch it, but I opened it while I was driving. What is in the bag, Tesser? Laptops, she said. 3 of them, and a stack of hard drives and a notebook with passwords. My heart skipped a beat. She had the mother lode. She had the digital evidence of every scam, every theft, every identity he had stolen. Bring it to me, I said. Right now. Drive to Maran's office. I will meet you there. I am scared, Hully. He keeps texting me, asking where I am. Turn off the phone, I said. Drive. An hour later, we were in Maran's office. Tesser looked like a refugee from a war zone. She placed the bag on the table. I opened the notebook. It was a ledger of crimes. There were lists of names, social security numbers, bank account login. There was a page dedicated to my family, my father's pension details, my mother's social security, my bank accounts, and there were emails. Tesser had printed them out from the laptop. Emails between Mason and a contact named Vegas Shark. Subject, the wedding. Body, the mark is liquid. I will have the 80 large by Friday. Do not send the boys. I am good for it. The mark, Tesser read, tears sliding down her face. He called Dad the mark. He called me the cover. This proves everything, Marianne said, her eyes wide. This proves premeditation. It proves the gambling debt. It proves the identity theft. This is not just a civil case anymore. This is a 20-year sentence. I want to testify, Tesser said. Her voice was shaking, but her chin was up. I want to tell the judge everything. I want to tell them how he coached me, how he made me lie to you. You will get your chance, Marianne said. Tomorrow. We filed an emergency motion to add the new evidence. The judge granted a subpoena for Mason Vale, alias Evan Raw, to appear for an emergency hearing the next morning at 9:00. The sun rose on Tuesday with a heavy gray light. Dallas was covered in a thick layer of clouds. I arrived at the courthouse at 8:30. My parents were already there. They looked old. My father was leaning heavily on a cane I had never seen him use before. My mother was clutching a rosary. They saw me, and for the first time there was no anger in their eyes, just fear and shame. They had lost the house. They had lost the money. They had lost their dignity, and now they realized they had been played for fools by the man they championed over their own daughter. Tesser stood next to me. She was wearing a simple black dress. She looked like she was attending a funeral. Where is he? Tesser whispered, looking around the hallway. He should be here, Marianne said, checking her watch. The sheriff served the subpoena at the hotel last night. He signed for it. 9:00 came. The bailiff called the case. James versus James and Vale. We walked into the courtroom. The defense table was empty. My parents' lawyer was there looking nervous. But Mason's chair was vacant. Where is your client? The judge asked Mason's attorney. I do not know, Your Honor. The lawyer stammered. I spoke to him last night. He said he would be here. The judge frowned. Bailiff, sound the halls. The bailiff went to the door. Mason Vale, Evan Raw. Silence. The judge turned back to the room. His face was hard. Issue a bench warrant. No bail. I looked at the empty chair. A cold realization settled over me. He had run. He had realized the moment Tesser didn't come back with the car that the game was over. He had realized that without his cover, without the laptops, without the leverage, he was a sitting duck. He hadn't gone to the airport. The airport was watched. He is gone. I whispered to Marianne. He cannot get far. Marianne said, his accounts are frozen. His ID are burned. He has no car. He is a cockroach. I said cockroaches survive. But then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my home security system. Motion detected backyard camera. Motion detected. Glass break sensor. Kitchen window. I stared at the screen. He wasn't running to Bimes. He was at my house. He knew I was at the courthouse. He knew the house was empty. And he knew that I had backups of the evidence on my server. The server he needed to destroy if he wanted any chance of disappearing. Or perhaps he was looking for the one thing he knew I kept in my safe, the physical hard drive with the original logs. Marianne, I said, standing up. He is not missing. He is at my house. But I have a live feed, I said, showing her the phone. A figure in a dark hoodie was moving through my kitchen holding a crowbar. The judge looked at me. MS. James. Your Honor, Marianne said, her voice ringing out. The defendant is currently breaking and entering into the plaintiff's home. We have live video surveillance. The courtroom erupted. Get the police to that address. The judge roared. Now I looked at the screen. Mason Evan was smashing my monitors. He was tearing through my office like a rabid animal. It ends tomorrow, Marianne had said. No, I thought, watching the police dispatcher relay the code for a burglary in progress. It ends today. I looked at my parents. They were staring at the screen of my phone, watching the man they treated like a son destroy the home of the daughter they treated like a bank. That is him, my father whispered. That is the man we trusted. That, I said, is the man you sold me out for. I turned to Marianne. Let us go. I want to be there when they bring him out, in cuffs. The courtroom in Dallas County was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of floor wax and stale coffee. It was the smell of bureaucracy waiting to crush someone. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Marianne, clean. My spine was straight, my hands folded on the table. Across the aisle at the defense table sat the remnants of my family. My father, Gordon, looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 days. His suit hung loosely on his frame. My mother, Pamela, was weeping silently into a tissue, a performance that might have worked at a family dinner, but held no currency here. Tesser sat a few feet away from them, separated by a distinct physical gap that represented the chasm now between them. And then there was Mason or Evan Raw. He had been dragged into the room in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled to his waist. The break-in at my house had been the end of his run. He looked tired, his eyes darting around the room like a rat looking for a sewer grate. Judge Harrison entered the room. The bailiff called for order. This was not just a civil trial for asset recovery. Because of the magnitude of the fraud and the involvement of federal banking statutes, the district attorney had intervened to consolidate the hearings. Today was Judgment Day. Marianne stood up. She did not pace. She did not shout. She simply activated the large monitor facing the bench. Your Honor, Marianne began, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. The defense will attempt to paint this as a family misunderstanding. They will claim that Gordon and Pamela James were merely borrowing funds to finance a wedding, but the data tells a different story. Data does not have feelings. Data does not lie. On the screen, a timeline appeared. It was a digital autopsy of the theft. At 3:14 in the morning on Tuesday the 20th, Marianne narrated, pointing to the first time stamp. A device registered to the defendant, Evan Raw, alias Mason Vale, accessed the plaintiff's secure banking portal. This was not a panic move. This was a calculated intrusion using credentials harvested from a compromised laptop. The screen flashed to the flow of funds. It showed the $300,000 leaving my accounts. It showed the structuring the series of transfers just under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting flags. If this was a loan, Marianne asked, turning to my father, why did you structure the withdrawals to hide them from the IRS? Honest borrowers do not launder the money they borrow. My father flinched. He could not look at the screen. Marianne called our first expert witness, Dr. Aris Thorne, the forensic document examiner, set up her easel. She displayed the power of attorney side by side with my hospital admission logs. The signature on the left is the disputed mark, Dr. Thorne explained, using a laser pointer to trace the shaky, erratic lines of my name. The signature on the right is Miss Jane's standard autograph. The disputed signature exhibits a toxic tremor, a specific type of motor dysfunction consistent with the administration of heavy opioids. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, the medical logs confirmed that at the exact time this document was allegedly signed, the plaintiff had 50 mgs of dilaudid in her system. She could not have consented to a pizza order, let alone a durable power of attorney. This signature is not a contract. It is a crime scene. The judge looked at my father. Mr. James, did you guide your daughter's hand? My father stood up, his legs shaking. She smiled. Your Honor, she looked at me. I thought she understood. You thought she understood? Marianne interrupted. Or you needed her to understand because you had already promised the money to your son-in-law's bookie. Objection. The defense attorney cried weakly. Sustained, the judge said, though his eyes remained cold. But the point is noted. Then came the ordeal. Marianne played the recording from the night they ambushed me at my house. The acoustics in the courtroom were perfect. Every desperate, gaslighting word rang out clearly. You were high as a kite, giggling at the ceiling tiles. My father's voice echoed. It was for insurance. My mother's voice lied. If you pursue this, I will make it my mission to make you famous. Mason's voice threatened. The courtroom was dead silent. I saw the court reporter pause, her fingers hovering over the keys, shocked by the naked malice on the tape. My mother covered her face with her hands. She finally realized that her motherly concern sounded exactly like what it was manipulation, that the most damning testimony came from the victims. David Ross, the man who thought he had bought the Garland house, took the stand. He was a large man, but he looked defeated. I paid cash. Mr. Ross said, his voice thick with emotion. $285,000, my life savings. I moved my wife and my 6-month-old daughter into that house. 3 days later, I got a foreclosure notice from a bank I never heard of. Now I am being told I do not own the roof over my baby's head because these people sold me a lie. He pointed a trembling finger at my father. You shook my hand. You looked me in the eye and told me you were happy a young family was getting the home, and you knew the whole time you were stealing it. My father looked down at the table. He was shrinking minute by minute. Then Tesser took the stand. She walked slowly. She did not look at Mason. She looked at me. State your name, the bailiff said. Tesser James, she whispered. MS. James. Marianne asked gently. Did you know about the fraud? I knew we didn't have the money. Tesser said, her voice gaining strength. Mason Evan told me that Hully had plenty. He told me she was selfish. He said we had to take it because we deserved it. Did he threaten you? Yes, Tesser said. She took a deep breath. He told me that if I didn't go along with the plan, if I didn't sign the checks he put in front of me, that he would leave me. And then later, he told me that if I tried to leave him, I would be responsible for the debt. He made me feel like I was his accomplice, not his wife. She turned to the judge. We are not even married. He never filed the license. I was just a cover story so he could look respectable while he laundered the money. Mason lunged. It happened fast. The man in the orange jumpsuit surged forward, his chains rattling, shouting something about her being a liar. 2 bailiffs were on him instantly, slamming him back into his chair. Control your client. The judge roared. The climax, however, was not the violence. It was the procedure. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. 3 men in dark suits entered. They walked with the heavy, inevitable stride of federal agents. One of them approached the bench and handed a document to the judge. The judge read it. He raised his eyebrows. Mr. Rohr, the judge said, looking down at Mason. It appears the state of Texas is going to have to wait its turn. The lead agent stepped forward. Evan Raw, I am Special Agent Miller with the FBI. You are under arrest for wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and racketeering across state lines. We have linked your crypto wallets to a known money laundering syndicate in Nevada. We also have a warrant for the seizure of all assets. Mason slumped in his chair. The arrogance finally died. He wasn't just facing a theft charge in Dallas. He was facing 20 years in a federal penitentiary. The judge turned his attention to my parents. Gordon James, the judge said, you stood before this court and claimed you acted as a father. You did not. You acted as a thief. You exploited your daughter's medical vulnerability to steal her livelihood. You forged a signature. You defrauded a title company. You destroyed an innocent family's security. My father stood up. He was weeping now. I am sorry. I just wanted to help Tesser. You helped no one. The judge said, I find you guilty of forgery, theft of property over $200,000 and fraud. You are sentenced to 5 years in state prison. My mother wailed. Pamela James, the judge continued, you claim you were just following your husband, but the evidence shows you facilitated the remote access. You gaslighted the victim. You are found guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud. You are sentenced to 3 years probation and 2,000 hours of community service. The judge looked at Tesser. Tesser James, you were coerced and your testimony today was vital. However, you spent stolen money. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $80,000. You will avoid jail time, provided you complete a financial literacy course and maintain employment. Finally, the judge turned to me, or rather he turned to the issue of the house. Regarding the property at 412 Oak Creek Lane, the judge said, banging his gavel, the court finds that the seller, Holly James, did not hold title to the property. The property was owned by C. Bruce Holdings, LLC. A power of attorney for an individual does not grant authority to sell corporate assets. Therefore, the deed transfer is void ab initio. The sale never happened. He looked at David Ross. Mr. Ross, the title insurance company is ordered to refund your purchase price in full, plus interest and damages. The house returns to the LLC. The eviction is canceled. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The house was safe. Mr. Ross would get his money back from the insurance company. The knot was untied. The bailiffs moved in. They handcuffed my father. He looked at me as they led him away. Ully, he said. Ully, please. I did not look away. I did not smile. I just watched. Goodbye, Dad, I said softly. They led Mason out the side door to the federal transport van. He didn't look at anyone. He was already a ghost. My mother sat alone at the defense table, her face buried in her hands. Tesser stood up and walked over to me. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked out of the courtroom to begin her life of repayment. Marianne closed her briefcase. It is done. Yes, I said. It is. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Texas afternoon. The sun was blinding. The air was hot. I drove home in silence. When I walked into my house, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace. I walked into my office. The smashed monitors had been replaced. The servers were humming with a steady, rhythmic blue light. I sat down in my chair. I opened the file marked Project Family. I selected all the files, the recordings, the logs, the photos of the wedding. I hesitated for a moment. Then I hit archive. I did not delete them. A good analyst never deletes data. You archive it. You keep it cold, just in case the threat reemerges. But the active threat was neutralized. I spun my chair around and looked out the window at the manicured lawn of my subdivision. My parents had told me they drained my accounts. They told me they sold my house. They told me they had taken everything, but they forgot the one rule of the jumble. You do not steal from the person who keeps the watch. I took a sip of my tea. It was warm and jasmine-scented. They thought they took my life. I whispered to the empty room, a small genuine smile finally touching my lips. They only exposed themselves. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below telling me where you are listening from. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people. Thanks to all.